Hello, everybody. You have reached the bottom of the hour, so let's get started with today's LTEN webinar, Supercharge Your Sales Team, Learning Strategies That Work, sponsored by CMR Institute. My name is Tim Sosby. I'm Editorial Director for LTEN. It's my pleasure to welcome you today and to serve as a host of our webinar. I'm going to start with a few housekeeping items, then I'll turn things over to our speakers. We are planning a 30-minute session for you today. You'll notice that your phones are on mute, but we still want to hear from you. Any questions, any comments you have, please do type into the control panel, the questions module on your control panel there. Should be on the right side of your screen. Just type in, hit the submit button. We'll receive it and get to the questions as quickly as we can throughout today's webinar, or save them for a Q&A period. Also on that control panel, I wanted to point out the handouts window. There's a few items in the handouts window you may wish to download. There's some information from our sponsors today, CMR Institute, and some LTEN information as well. You can highlight the titles of those handouts, and the system will walk you through downloading to your desktop. And if you have any troubles with any of that, you can reach out to me. My email address is showing here on the screen, and I can connect you with the handouts offline as well. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand in the LTEN Self-Directed Learning Library. I'm going to share an address with you for that learning library later in today's program. I'm also going to send you an email with a direct link to the recording about an hour after we end today's program. So through that email or through the LTEN website, you'll be able to access today's recording, and feel free to share with your colleagues. And speaking of sharing, a follow-up survey is going to appear on a separate browser window when you leave today's program. Please do take a moment when you leave, look for that survey, and quickly share your thoughts with us. We always appreciate your feedback. And again, there's my email address. If I can help with anything, don't hesitate to reach out, and I will share that email address with you later in today's program as well. Okay, so with all that said, I'm going to turn things over to our moderator today, Sharon Lustig, Senior Vice President of Client Solutions for CMR Institute. Sharon, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Tim. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. As Tim mentioned, my name is Sharon Lustig. I'm with CMR Institute, and we're really happy that you've joined us today. We're proud to be a preferred industry partner with LTEN and really thank them for hosting this webinar. Today, I am joined by Dr. Patrick Woodard, the Chief Healthcare Information Officer at Monument Health, and Mike Steelman, Vice President of Managed Markets at Dexcom. Thank you both for being here today.
Thanks, Sharon.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So as we speak to learning strategies that work to support higher performance for our sales teams, we'll first examine some obstacles and then strategies to overcome those barriers. And then we'll go on to some ideas for retooling our training approach. Please note here on your screen that we will be using Mentimeter today, so please visit this site and use this code to prepare to participate. We'll enter this in the chat for easy access, and you can use the QR code with your phone as well. Also, please feel free to type any questions that you might have in the question area, as Tim mentioned. We'll monitor those, and hopefully we'll have time for Q&A at the end as well. So as this is a fairly ambitious conversation for 30 minutes, we'll begin right away. Dr. Woodard, as we begin our discussion with obstacles that training leaders are facing, it seems really important to begin with an understanding of the challenges that providers and health systems are facing. Could you speak to some of those challenges?
Absolutely. So I think really as we all have come out of COVID, there's a lot that has maybe the rest of the country has kind of settled into, but we haven't really figured that out. And we're still dealing with a lot of the staffing challenges that I think everybody saw during the last few years, but have been really persistent in healthcare. There's a lot of communication and media coverage around nursing shortages, but the shortages really extend to across the entire health system. That would include places in like lab, medical assistants, even in the back office, things like rev cycle and IT. So that is a primary driver of a lot of what we're doing today, just around how do we find ways to be more efficient. The other thing that hasn't really changed too much, unfortunately, is the financial challenges that health systems are seeing just around cash crunch and expense inflation over the course of the last couple of years. Most health systems have around at least a 50% of a payer mix that's coming from the government, and those rates are set by Congress and CMS. So you're seeing a 2.93% pay increased, but your expenses have gone up in many cases by 8 or 10% over that same period. So you're really trying to find ways to become more efficient in the back office, and how are you able to do more with less, which has really kind of been the mantra in healthcare for the last several decades, but I think has really intensified over the past year. So really, when we're looking at people that we can partner with, we're looking to see ways to really focus on both of those things: staffing challenges and helping our clinicians be more efficient, and then how do we also do more with the dollars that we have available. And those are primary drivers of most of our decision making.
Well, thank you for those, Dr. Woodard. I'm holding on to those as challenges in the marketplace. Before we move on and speak with Mike, let's check in with our audience and talk a little bit, or have you speak to us about what obstacles we're facing as life sciences managers, training managers, and leaders. What are we currently facing in this healthcare landscape? If you would interact with Menti, here the code and the address right on your screen. We'd love to have your opinion about what's coming and what you're facing today. I don't think our screen is moving. There, it's coming.
It's coming along.
It's coming. A lot of the same things that we're definitely hearing from our customers: time, resources, accessibility, retention. I know is a big issue in the market across the board. Priorities. Mm-hmm.
These look like some similar challenges that Dr. Woodard is having.
Mm-hmm.
Or the system. Time, reimbursement, retention, turnover, avoiding change, priorities.
I'm not sure if that makes me happier that I'm not the only one, or despondent that it's everybody.
Yeah. It may just be, I think your point on the 3% increase versus, the 10% or more increase in cost affects everybody. So.
Maybe we can look at ways to align instead of looking at it as a boundary. So Mike, as people are coming in with their answers, would you speak to these and other obstacles that training managers and training leaders are facing today?
I mean, I think this is a good list, so thank you all for them. I think, we all, post-COVID, learn to, I guess I will say, learned in a different way, right? So we went from, at least in my organization, primarily in-person learning to now it is this mixture of in-person versus online versus both. And I actually really identify with the list that was overwhelming content, whereas you may say that here, omni-channel strategy of trying to tailor, to learn to all different modalities, whether that's a podcast, whether that is, something that is done via a teleconference, whether that's Zoom, so on and so forth. So I think, trying to match all those different modalities, trying to help people learn where they're at, whether they're live in the workplace or not, in a way that is streamlined on the budget, done in less time, and still gives an ROI. Those are challenges that I see, on the learning side, or in my case, on the sales leader side as well. So.
Thank you for that. As we look at strategies to overcome some of these real barriers that seems like both sides are facing, let's dive a little bit more into interactions with customers. So coming back to you, Mike, what have your most successful interactions with clinicians or providers or healthcare leaders really looked like? And what have your key takeaways been from these successes?
Yeah, I think some of and I'll use these as examples kind of post the COVID world, after, a lot of customer interaction came back live. I think it was, first of all, just recognizing the reality of where the customer is. Dr. Woodard, I think, hit it nicely, of the challenges that existed beforehand are still there, but maybe just exponentially, increased, right, of the pressure on the budget, trying to deal with staff turnover that's all-time high. So I think you need to recognize where the customer's at. And then I'll tell a quick story. I mean, I think so one of the most successful interactions I've seen from someone on my team was post-COVID. They were actually able to successfully get through on the phone because it was actually the pharmacy director that picked up the phone due to staffing shortages. They asked to meet with the person in person, and the pharmacy director is like, well, I think that's fine. You're the first ones that actually asked post-COVID to come in and meet with me in person. And it was a little bit of a shocker to my team, right? I have to kind of go back and remind them of, hey, it's okay to ask for things, in a different way than it was before. You may get no, right? And that's fine. You may then need to reach out in different ways. But those successful interactions, I would say now, is you need to think differently, right? That may be at a conference. That may be at a public forum meeting, that are out there. That may be a teleconference where you guys are in the same Zoom of some educational opportunity, right? I would say, just as we work differently, our customers work differently as well. And we've got to find that mixture of meeting them and understanding where they're coming from as well. And I'll leave it at that for now.
All right. So back to you, Dr. Woodard. What do you think customer-facing teams, not just sales, anyone from the team, should be challenging themselves to do better or do more or do differently to help providers with patient care?
I think it's a really good question, and one that is really important in terms of creating that longer term value, something that persists just beyond that first initial interaction. And what I see as really beneficial is when someone comes prepared, really understanding not just the challenges, because I think many of those are global and some of those may be local, unique to a particular organization, but what is that organization's plan to overcome those challenges? A lot of companies, mine included, publish a strategy, and that has a couple of maybe vague terms about what we're looking to do. But where possible, is it find out where, like Mike said, where a leader from the health system maybe has given a talk or been a part of a panel at a conference, and if there's notes from that or if it was recorded, to be able to see kind of some of the insights from within the organization to understand what are the challenges specific to the organization, and then how do they plan to tackle those. I'd say as a general rule, we tend to look more for partners and not just people to buy things from. So where an organization can come already aligned to what we're trying to solve, really makes it easier for us to understand that, number one, you did your research and understand what we're trying to do, but then number two, I can already see in my mind how we're aligned and how that will create longer term success. I think, we, because of the challenges and financially in particular, we do a better job today than we've probably ever done in terms of evaluating the ROI, and does this thing that we think will have an outcome actually achieve that outcome. And so being able to be prepared with those answers in advance really does help us understand the value that you bring as a partner to our organization.
Thank you. I appreciate that viewpoint. Back to you, Mike, as we think about the strategies. So what are your strategies for gaining access and for having impactful conversations?
Yeah, I think Dr. Woodard gave a lot of good clues there on that. So I think it's understanding what they say publicly. So, and that could be if it's a public company, right? What are they saying on the earnings call? But I might give the pro tip of wait till the analysts start asking the questions, and then hear what comes in a lot deeper from after the kind of the finance script during the earnings call. I think public comments are very helpful as well. Like if it is a non-for-profit group, as Dr. Woodard said, they're probably out talking to somebody. So the CEO is probably out there somewhere. If it's the chief medical officer, they're out there somewhere. Just go listen. Take the time to do that extra effort. So, and then I would also say, and I don't know how many times I've seen this done, out there in the industry, is find out where they have lunch and then just go listen to what's happening out in the different area around, right? You'll kind of hear the buzz. Maybe it's not directly, if I use Dr. Whitter's example, from himself, but maybe it's 3 or 4 that are people that are a couple of levels under him that you can talk to and just listen and learn and check in on that corporate strategy and ask some deeper questions. I think, before you ask, in this case, like, to meet with Dr. Woodard, having a better understanding of the world that they're facing and the challenges they have, and if you fit in there or not. And sometimes you won't fit, and that's okay. So sometimes just recognizing that and saving that conversation maybe for a different time, or finding a different angle when you can come in, might be just as valuable. I had an account executive, it's been a couple weeks now, but they said, I never really hit my stride with this customer until after about 6 years, because then I had a perfect spot where I could relate in. We had check-ins, we did our thing, we moved it a little bit, but eventually I totally understood where they were coming from and was able to build it in. Now, maybe that's too long in some organizations. I get that challenge, but that's also maybe finally that person learning, right, what mattered to that organization and going from there. So it is still, in some ways, I would say, old school account access and management, but then also thinking, did you practice it beforehand, and did you really make sure you had impact, right, or did you go through the motions? So a couple of things to think about there.
Definitely things to think about. Kind of going back to one of the challenges we saw earlier, and that I've definitely heard from our customers, is as a sales leader, what advice would you give to training leaders, training managers who are challenged to get time, attention, and sometimes budget dollars from sales leadership for training, reinforcement, and coaching, pulling these things through?
Yeah, and I guess I'm a little bit lucky because I've seen both sides of the fence of being a sales leader and then being a trainer in my past. I think the first thing I think about from the training standpoint is, do you have good metrics of the value and the ROI that you bring? Just like our customers, right? And if I go to, any health system out there, the first thing they're going to ask is, what's the return on investment of the product? So it's going to be the very same thing I'm going to ask the trainers, right? How have we done in the past on training? What did the team think about that? Did it make a difference for us? And if it didn't, did the trainer come back and did we have a conversation about it? So I like to call that kind of earning the time. I don't think it's any different than what I need to do when I go out and talk to a customer. Did I earn the time as well? And if they earn the time, I tend to make more time for that in the future. So, and if we didn't, then we have a discussion on that as well. So why we didn't, and maybe how we want to allocate budget differently going forward. So I think about that as, did they know what I was looking for? Did we engage training on those different topics? Did we measure it afterwards? Did we check in with my team and see it was valuable? And, did we do it in a way that, met the budget as well? So it's almost like a match parallel to me in my mind of the value I'm trying to bring out to the customers in the world. I hope the trainers would do the same thing, think of it that way for myself.
I'm going to take a question from the audience real quick, Mike. One of our listeners wants to know, why did you mention omni-channel as an obstacle? We use multiple learning channels and programs to serve multiple learning styles of our teammates.
Yeah, it's a good point. So I guess I can put that as, it might be a blessing and a curse. The blessing is everything that was just described right there. The curse that I've seen is in myself, when sometimes I'm involved in doing training as well, is I may have to do it once live. Then another time it gets recorded in a different way for a podcast. Another time it's done a different way where we do it in person. And so it might be the same training that I'm doing 3 or 4 ways. Now I know there's probably some great technological solutions out there that say that they can solve that, but that may not fit with the budget, and that may not fit, with the different modalities that we have in our organization. So I think of it that way. Like, I understand from an adult learning principle standpoint, we all learn differently, and some may want that visually, some may want that, better that they can listen, others may want to read, but it takes time to do each of those as we go through. So I think it takes time with my training team to do that. And then that's a debate we have a lot, right? Is it worth it in which modality to hit for which customer? So that's where I'm coming from on that omni-channel side. Even though I would say I push my own marketing team when I'm out talking to payers, I want an omni-channel approach for that exact same reason. So good question, for sure.
Blessing and a curse, I'm sure. Thank you very much. So moving on, Dr. Woodard, thinking about what could make you take a meeting, what types of data do physicians and healthcare executives need to make the right choices? And what data are you skeptical of, for instance, for medical devices and prescription medications?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question and something that we certainly spend a lot of time talking about. Really, it comes down to some of the traditional business metrics that we would want to know. Does it have an ROI? Over what period of time will I achieve that ROI? You know, anytime a vendor gives us this particular number, we usually cut it in a third or more just because we don't necessarily believe that we'll necessarily achieve that. So we're certainly skeptical of ROI numbers. We do like to see real world data as much as possible. So whether that be clinical trials, of course, you know, a randomized control trial is always the best, and evidence that it's used in similar types of systems, I think, is also important, especially for tools that maybe are particularly new. Knowing that it was in use at Cleveland Clinic or Brigham and Women's or Stanford is great, but we're not like those organizations in many ways, and so maybe don't have the staff to be able to support it in the same kind of way. So understanding that there are organizations like us that are able to see the same types of benefits for patients or financial benefits that are reasonable real world examples of being able to achieve that. And then I think some of the other elements of just what does it take to get this up and running? What is the long-term care and feeding of a particular product? What are the data requirements and that we would have on an ongoing basis that we would be able to demonstrate that it is something that would be beneficial for our patients and that we are proving that we're seeing those benefits? And then maybe lastly, how does it integrate within the environment that we already have in place? Is it something that if it's a technology tool, does it integrate to the EHR? If it's a pharmaceutical, is it something that we can easily get on formulary or that payers are paying for? Those are the types of questions that we would want to have answered as part of just our overall intake process.
Mike, any comments on the thoughts there? I know that that's data is a passion for you.
Data is a passion for sure. I'd say, first of all, know what the system or know what the individual hospital or customer is trying to accomplish first. Are they trying to gain members? Are they trying to improve quality? Are they trying to save money? Are they trying to make money? Because the data you provide should relate to that. So, and that could be very different, right? I could give an example, with one system, right? I've seen products that decrease ER visits or decrease hospitalizations. Well, depending on the finances of the system, that could be good or that could be really bad for them, right? So, so in some cases you may want to present that, sometimes you don't. So I think it always starts from my standpoint of understanding, what they're trying to accomplish, what data that you have that then matches that, and then know that you're going to get pushback. I think Dr. Woodard just said it. You know what? I'm skeptical of ROI, even if it is data from that. But that's okay, right? No data is perfect. You can have that discussion through that and then be confident in what you're presenting and then ask, questions to follow up on what that could look like, or maybe even do a joint partnership to investigate it in there. So those are thoughts that come to mind, sure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you very much. Proof points for everything.
Absolutely.
All right, so moving on to our third objective today, retooling your approach. Let's turn our discussions towards some new thoughts and approaches for training. So Dr. Woodard, I'll point a question back to you. What top 3 skills or competencies would you want to see from a customer-facing role?
I think first and foremost, it's understanding the language that we speak. Healthcare is a business, but it's a business that operates in a way that's a little bit different from most other industries in that they customer is many times not the payer, right? You have a third-party insurance company that's paying for things, and so that creates a level of complexity that we have to live with every day. And just understanding some of those realities, that the best product in the world won't make it through the door if the insurance isn't paying for it, as an example. I think the others are around just how a particular sales cycle works in a health system. Health systems do not move quickly in terms of procurement. I think you're on the order of months or sometimes many years before something will actually make it through the process. And then understanding just some of the intricacies of the purchasing process. Does it require a CEO's signature because it's too expensive and you need to help educate the CEO now of what this is and why we're going to be doing it? Or is it something that a pharmacy director can purchase because it's under the signature authority threshold? Those are things that you need to be able to understand in advance so that you don't, so that your expectations are set. And then the last of those, I think, is really just not to really kind of beat a dead horse here, but understanding the particular challenges that a particular health system is having, being able to understand that and find that from publicly available data to really position yourself as a partner for the organization and not just somebody selling a particular product. So I think those are the three that would really be helpful for me. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Gentlemen, I'm watching our time. We are a few minutes close, but Mike, I understand your organization has a skill model you rely on as the foundation for your training, and it addresses a lot of what we've talked about today. This is a much scaled back, obviously, model, just to give a flavor to our audience. Would you speak to this a bit?
Yeah, from our standpoint, before, someone's ever out in front of the customer, we went out and we've talked to several customers about what are the core competencies that they're looking for in an account executive. And then from there, we have, about 10 different skill sets that we, are looking for. We put training courses behind that, each of those areas. So before they ever come out and see someone like Dr. Woodard, they, know exactly what we're looking for or what we consider our standard for that. And then, take our training and, improve it every single year in those areas. And it has to change. Like there's a lot of stuff that changes every year. The jargon that Dr. Woodard was talking about, that's a big portion of it, right? Do you know HEDIS? Do you know JCO? Do you know NCQA? Do you know the Inflation Reduction Act, right? So those are all things that are out there, and every year something new flavor will be in there. So, and are you keeping up on all that? So we use a skills-based approach, and then from there train behind it and try to keep up on that every year is one approach to doing it.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next slide is a question to Mike again. How do we ensure that our folks are field ready? Any additional thoughts on that? I know we've talked a little bit throughout.
Yeah. I like to say, I mean, in the end, you got to practice like you're going to go do. So in our case, we already mentioned the skills model. We mentioned training behind it. We then take whatever value materials we're presenting to the customer, whatever presentations we're going to have. We test those and we do training sessions with those with ex-payers or ex-customers that are out there, available to be done. So that's one way we do that. I would say that's something that probably my team values the most, is they get that practice where I'm not watching, the leaders are not watching. They just get to go talk to, some ex-payers and practice and ask them different thoughts in a safe learning environment. So I think that is something that can apply to a lot of different trainers out there as they're helping field colleagues learn of different customers, and let them test on their own before they go out and do.
A good safe space.
Exactly, for sure. Seems simple, but you got to take the time to do it. So.
Yeah, and I think we've already discussed the pressure on time.
Sure.
In summary, Mike, would you like to speak to these training techniques?
Yeah, I think this may hit a lot of those right there. So I think, I always tell my team, before you go out and meet with someone like Dr. Woodard, it's probably if you're going to meet with them for 30 minutes, you're probably practicing or getting ready 3 hours, at least of time over several days beforehand. So to be able to do everything that you see right here on the screen. So, and then I will also say, maybe the one thing that's not listed on there is talk to a peer, talk to a mentor before you go into those big important standpoints. I can't tell you how many times talking to someone that also calls on them in a non-competitive, space that you can gain insight from. So I might add that on the list as well. So.
That's a good addition, definitely. Well, gentlemen, as we are closing in on the bottom of the half hour, I really want to thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your insights. And to the audience, we have run out of time for Q&A, but we are going to follow up not only with the recording, but also with a follow-up piece that kind of summarizes all of these takeaways, adds a few more tools and techniques and some things that we would share with you in summary. So look for that in your inboxes here in the next day, hopefully. Thank you so much for joining us today. Tim, I guess we'll turn it back over to you.
Sharon, thank you very much. That was a great presentation. I'm going to go ahead and take it back to my screen here. Everybody, thank you for joining us today. Just as we close out, I'm going to share some quick LTEN information with you. A quick look at the LTEN events calendar where it stands now for the rest of this quarter. We've got a bunch more coming next year, of course. So keep an eye on the LTEN events calendar. This changes quite frequently. It's a good idea to bookmark this. And of course, I want to have you join us for our next webinar. We'll be back here on Tuesday, November 14th, talking about measuring real trading impact. You can find out more information about this webinar and others at l-10.org/webinars. Here's an address where today's recording will be housed. There'll be a follow-up email sent to you. And finally, there's my email address. If I can help with anything, certainly don't hesitate to reach out. So just as we're closing out, I'm going to send some final thank yous to our speakers today, Mike Steelman, Dr. Patrick Woodard, and Sharon Lustig, our sponsors, CMR Institute, and mostly I'm going to thank all of you for your time, attention, and participation in today's program. If you have any questions, anything we can do to help, certainly don't hesitate to reach out. In the meantime, let me wish you a good rest of your day, a good rest of your week, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.